Got it up? 1950s. Okay, you're going to pass around this sheet, and you're going to put your name down that you completed it. So usually when I'm doing this and you notice, I kind of walk behind you and look at your stuff as you're pulling it up. As we cover a topic, please have it up. So you'll sign and pass it around. Yes. Yeah, you'll take notes, but you don't have to do extensive notes. You know, I prefer you to listen and participate rather than be so into notes. But you know, a couple of things would be nice if you added a couple of bullets. Yeah, just something that you didn't know. It was an aha sort of thing. If I mention a topic and there's something that interested you, you might put a bullet, you know, a few words, a sentence, something like that. It doesn't matter. I just want to see that you're participating. You're involved in your education. Okay, today we're talking about the 1950s. Now, let me give you the setting just a little bit. 1940s main part of the 1940s involved World War II. America was extremely concerned that we would get involved in another war, and that was something that they didn't want to happen. Okay? We didn't want to have another, sort of war. It's a time period to where we're going to call the Cold War, though. And the Cold War would be a time period to where we start dividing the globe between those countries that are pro-U.S. or pro-West and those who are pro-Soviet Union or China, that sort. And of course, there were other countries that just didn't get involved either way, non-aligned countries. But it seems in our mind, though, that we think that there are communists and then us. Okay? And we have this fear. Fear, the Red Scare, kind of like it was in the 1920s. Okay, the first topic that I want to get into is a person by the name of Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong. And overlook my artwork.
Which presentation are we looking at?
1950s.
1950s.
Okay, so Mao Zedong. And now you're going to see different writing sometimes with Mao Zedong or any of the Chinese writing. Remember, you have two main languages. You have Mandarin and Cantonese. But you also have two main writing styles. Pinyin and Wei Gao's. So sometimes you'll see something written one way, and then you'll see it written another way, and you're like, it has to be two different people or two different places. It's not. Same thing. Okay? It's just whatever textbook or whatever website you happen to be on and they follow. So Mao Zedong can be spelled different ways. Same thing. You cannot look, if first of all, when I look at your slides, because you hopefully have a picture, that's up or something, but you couldn't seem to find, or was it difficult to find a picture of Mao Zedong?
No.
No. Everything Chinese has got Chairman Mao on it. Give you the setting just a little bit. Before World War II, a civil war was going on. And it was a civil war between communists, led by Mao Zedong, and the Nationalist Party, which is the traditional party that had been in power, by a guy by the name of Chiang Kai-shek. Now, Chiang Kai-shek would have supported the West. Okay? Do you understand what I mean by the West? Because now is a time period in history where we seem to really use, the West a lot as a term. And what we mean by West is Western Europe, those democracies. We're talking about United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, advanced nations. We're not talking about, any like African nations or South American or anything like that. We're talking about advanced nations. Those that supported communism, the Soviet Union, that's the East. And those that supported us or Western Europe would be the West. So this is really starting something that we typically call in history our East-West conflict. Okay? So you'll see that a lot of times in writing and you're like, oh, what does that mean? It's like North and South. This is East and West. So we had this civil war that's going on before World War II. And you've got this main movement going on. Even Chairman Mao writes his own book, the Little Red Book, but on his form of communism. United States, we're going to be in support of Chiang Kai-shek. Except we don't send forces or anything like that before World War II. And remember, China before this time period had really been kind of an eclectic group of people. You remember you had dynasties, and the dynasties would rule various regions, and it seemed like when a dynasty would control a larger region of China, but not all of it, we seem to know those time periods in history. You know, the Ming Dynasty, that sort of stuff. Now we're starting to see where the Chinese provinces are starting to meld together as a proper China. You don't have to write everything, just you know, as a proper China together. Except we see a civil war. The Civil War slows down and stops because of World War II. First of all, you see the Japanese that they move into the northern part of an area called Manchuria. And Manchuria, of course they're going to rename it Manchukuo. And Manchuria was noted for its forests and its natural resources as far as like iron ore. So Japan could get the natural resources that they needed. And then as the war with World War II goes on, they move further down into China because they're trying to create that greater Asiatic League, remember? So they're trying to take all of China. So these two people, before the war, are fighting with one another, and now they've decided that they're going to, what is that?
Attendance, yeah, attendance.
Why are two of you coming?
Yes, I was like,
I don't need two of them. Okay? Anyway, I'm gonna wash your left. It's right there. Mao Zedong, Chiang Kai-shek, and they decided during the war, during World War II, that they're going to unite against the Japanese. So there's no longer a civil war. Well, we've already covered World War II. We know the outcome, the results of World War II. Now they go back to fighting. Civil War all over again. United States decides that we're not going to get involved at all. So we're, you know, Truman is the president, and he's like, I'm not going to get into this. Not going to get up, pick a side. You know, sure, I want this guy to win. Okay, but we're not going to fight. We're not going to be involved. Now, Americans do get involved. We have freedom fighters, things like that. People that go over and they're going to fight for Chiang Kai-shek and against communism. Because, you know, we're a nation that we're fearful of communism, so we're going to fight it wherever we can. What happens is that Mao Zedong runs Chiang Kai-shek out of the country, he and his forces. But they flee to an island called Formosa that's off the coast. We know that today as the island of Taiwan. As a nation and as the West looked at this little island as being China. So there were, for a time period, two Chinas. Okay? So this was China, it wasn't called Taiwan, anything like that. Well, the funny thing is that the world, now think about the population. You got 1 billion people in China. And we're going to say, this doesn't exist. We're not recognizing you. Okay? You're not a government that we are going to recognize at all. We recognize these people. And we're going to help these people out all we can. Okay? We're going to give them munitions. We're going to give them whatever they need to make sure that they stay free. But we're not going to allow you to go in there and take them over. Red China versus free China, if you will. Now you know what happens, right? You know what causes this easing of tensions to where we start recognizing these people as China. You know when that occurs, right? Sure you do. You ever seen Forrest Gump? Anybody seen Forrest Gump? Forrest Gump. What's the event that causes the Chinese and the Americans to start talking to one another again? What are they doing? Ping pong. It's called ping pong diplomacy. Now I'll cover this again when we get into the 1970s with Richard Nixon. But ping pong diplomacy, the idea that both nations start sending a ping pong team, into each other's country for competition, and that eases the tensions. Time period of détente, we're easing the tensions between the East and West. But at any rate, we don't recognize China for a while. We're also fearful that other countries are going to fall under communist rule. Because we have this theory called the domino theory. It's one of your slides. The idea that when one country falls in Asia, another one will fall, and another one, and it's just, you know, this constant process to where they will lose to communism. And America, you know, we're going to defend as many countries as we possibly can to prevent them from turning over to communism. One of the next topics that comes up is a little bit different region that's really close. It's Korea. Okay, Korea is a peninsula. It's a peninsula that was administered and kind of, I guess you want to view it as a colony of Japan for a while. So Japan has been eliminated as a world power of any sort, a nation that was going to cause us any sort of trouble.
I can't even work.
Huh?
I can't even work.
Who's this from? Okay, go to the student union and work with Miss Dr. Hendrickson. She's there. What you need?
Don't mind me, I'm looking for that.
Okay. So we have Korea. Korea would be one of those locations that after World War II, it was kind of decided that Korea would have a northern region and a southern region. The northern region would be kind of pro-Chinese, more of your communist-backed, if you will. Okay, North Korea, and then South Korea would be pro-West. Okay, it would be a democracy. Everything's going to go real well until North Korea decides to send forces down into South Korea. So they cross this 38th parallel, this demilitarized zone, and they go across, they take over Seoul, the capital, they work their way all the way down the peninsula until they get to the bottom part, which is called the Pusan Perimeter. Remember when World War II ended, Douglas MacArthur, a guy who, you have a slide on also, guy from Little Rock, Little Rock. Remember, he was the one that was in the Philippines. He is the one that said that, you know, we would return, that sort of stuff. He's the best general we have in the Pacific. Well, he's in charge of Japan. Okay, and Japan is going through its rebuilding. You know, we've still got a military presence there. They're building their government. They're trying to turn it into a democracy. They're building the economy, that sort of thing. So he's there. So he takes his forces, or some forces, from this area, strikes in the Pusan perimeter, and then moves his way northward. Okay? Moves his way northward, and oh goodness, see the line, the demilitarized zone? He keeps going. And he keeps going. And he keeps going until he gets to the northern part. Get to the Yalu River. Okay? And then lo and behold, these little people, not little, these multitude of people, cross the river, and they're known as Chinese. Thousands and thousands and thousands of them. You have 1 million men, you know, cross the river, and they start heading this direction. Well, we didn't want to go into war with China, against communist China. So we end up reestablishing that line. Now, when did the conflict with Korea end? It's still going on. We might not shoot weapons or anything like that. We still have a military force that is located along the 38th parallel. Imagine it more as like, say the area between here and that ridge over there, the hill over there. That's kind of the demilitarized zone. And, you know, used to they'd have tanks that were maybe pointed toward one another, things like that. Now they have rockets, you know, men and rockets and everything. They're still not getting along. This is where, you know, occasionally you'll watch a show and there'll be some nut job that is always depicted as the leader of North Korea. You ever see anything like that? Some of those? Okay, and you're, huh? Like The Interview, stuff like that? Guys, that isn't so far off from reality. Okay, you've got a guy, a younger guy, that his society believes that he, you know, destined by God to be, you know, their leader. They have been indoctrinated for years, or what do you call it, brainwashed. This is a government that they go out and they get like a Disney movie. They try to remake it, whatever. They change it, they edit it somehow, make it look like their government came up with it. So, I mean, they've gone through and they tried to shelter their entire population of people from hearing anything from the outside world. So they think that they are the only country that is, you know, they're the world power, you know, major world power. The United States is just, you know, like a Sodom and Gomorrah. It's all kinds of, you know, corruption and death and all this other stuff. He's a nut job, total nut job. He's got rockets. Okay, he's got, you know, nuclear capabilities, that sort of stuff. Not a real good place for us to be necessarily. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So if you were to ask any person in North Korea what the stance, what the economic power of America is versus Korea,
Well, they think that they're number one. Yep.
that makes me
And
vote.
here's the thing too. Say that there's somebody who just doesn't fully go along with him. You'll find yourself unemployed, and when I mean unemployed, you can't work anymore because you're 6 feet under. He gets rid of any sort of opposition. You know, he controls the media. He controls every aspect of their life. Massive famines have occurred and still occur in North Korea. If it weren't for China coming in every now and then and you know, getting them under control, they'd probably be more of a rogue nation than they already are. You know, they don't even fall in line with even like communism. I mean, it's like a dictatorship. There needs to be a new word like idiocracy. Just an idiot. You know, that's running it. This is a society that, think about this. You look out across. You're looking across the demilitarized zone. Okay? And you see this beautiful city. And it's a facade. It's really not there. I mean, it is there, but it's not what you think. You know, it's like hulls of buildings, or it's, you know, just the outline part of a building, the silhouette. The idea that they have people that, you know, come in and like view what everything looks like, and from a distance it looks like this great supermarket where somebody could go in and buy goods, and then you realize it's like pictures or, you know, like it's fake fruit, that sort of stuff.
Yes, that would be just
Yeah. You know, I mean, it's just, I mean, we need to send Dennis Rodman back and do what they did in the interview. Just kidding, but we could get rid of maybe both of them, Dennis Rodman and him. Whatever. It's just a crazy.
Sad.
And still in existence. I mean, think about the money that we pay as American citizens to make sure that South Korea stays South Korea. That North Korea doesn't move their tanks in and take everything. So now you can drive your Hyundais and that sort of stuff. Not saying that that's a bad thing. We're trying to protect South Korea. But it's amazing to me how, you know, sometimes, you know, nut job people can get into power and stay in there for a long time. And the people worship him. Anyway. Okay, so you realize that we've got this conflict going on, the idea that you know, we're trying to make sure that more countries don't fall under communist sort of rule, that it's free and open to the West. We're going to see our next one to occur in the next decade when we cover the 60s with Vietnam. Okay? And that's going to be more easy to explain there. And you'll see this domino theory carry over to that. 1954. 1954, we have an issue that occurs. And it deals with a court case called Brown versus Board of Education. See, this little girl in Topeka, Kansas, she wanted to go, she lived close to a white school, she wanted to go to a white school and get a better education. This wasn't the only court case that was dealing with this. Okay? This is known as a landmark court case, partly because it's also a class action court case, meaning that you know, if Mr. Kilmer here, if he were to be suing for the same thing, that he wanted to go to a different school or something like that, instead of doing, you know, Kilmer versus Springdale, they tie in a lot of court cases that are dealing with the same topic, same issues, and they put it under the broad category under Brown versus Board, and then it becomes landmark. And a landmark case is also one of those that's far-reaching. It moves into other areas. This is not just education. So you remember in 1896, we had a court case called Plessy versus Ferguson. And in Plessy versus Ferguson, there was a guy in Louisiana. He got on a train, and the train was going, it doesn't matter where it was going, but he paid for a first-class ticket. So he gets on this train, and somebody on the train, a conductor, decides that this person is black. He wasn't even totally black. He was just partially black. But decides that he needs to go to get off the train or go to another car. And he says, you know what, I paid for a first-class ticket. It ends up going to court. And the court at that particular time said separate but equal is okay. So if you have, a school, you have a black school and you have a white school, you both teach 10th grade biology, it's equal. You have two water fountains, black water fountain, white water fountain, it's equal. Okay. You have a bus, the bus is going from point A to point B, whether you're on the front of the bus or the back of the bus, it's okay. The problem is that it never was okay. Brown versus Ford proved that it wasn't okay, that separate but equal was inherently wrong. You have that 10th grade biology class, the white school has new textbooks, the black school has 15-year-old textbooks that the white school used and got rid of. You have a water fountain, the white one works, the black one doesn't. That sort of thing. Okay? So they're going to say that you can't do that anymore. Now this is going to be far-reaching, and we're going to see the bigger movement of this in the 60s. Okay? But immediately after this, we have a trial, a test trial of this. Not a real trial, but a test of this. We had a group of people who wanted to make sure that they found a location that they could test this theory on a grand scale. And it ended up being in Little Rock. And it ended up being at a school called Little Rock Central. See, Little Rock Central during that time period, I had looked at something at one point that it was the 9th best, or voted the 9th best school district in the nation. It had, stellar, science labs. It had all new equipment. If you look at the geography, the architecture of Little Rock Central, it's an impressive building even today. But back then, it was really opulent. So you end up having these 9 students who were chosen to go to Little Rock Central. Daisy Bates, the leader of it, was chosen. It wasn't like this was a random thing. It wasn't where somebody said, you know what, I want to go to the black school today. It was people pushed them and they wanted to make a media stance. So they end up going to Little Rock Central. Now our governor at that time period was Orville Faubus. And Orville Faubus was somewhat of a radical. He didn't want anybody doing anything that he didn't approve of. And in this particular case, he had heard a lot of voices from people who didn't want it to be integrated. So he ends up sending in the Arkansas National Guard. So the Arkansas National Guard is going to prevent these children from going to school at Little Rock Central. He said that, by going to Horace Mann, the other high school, the black high school, their education was just fine, no big deal. They should go back to that particular school. So he sends troops in, prevents them from going. Our president during that time period was Eisenhower, Dwight D. Eisenhower. And Eisenhower sends in federal troops. So he sends in federal troops, does away with the National Guard. And so anyway, you've got federal troops there, the kids get to go to school. Of course, the first graduate, you know the name of the first graduate? Ernest Green. When I was in school, and I think I told you this story before, my high school teacher was an actor. Okay? And he was in the Ernest Green story. He played in it, so it was real neat watching, a movie and you actually see your teacher as an actor. Kind of interesting. So anyway, caused lots of controversy. A lot of people didn't graduate. A lot of people didn't go to school. My high school, I'm sorry, not my high school. The first job that I worked at, my high school principal that I worked for, he ended up graduating from Little Rock about that time period. But he didn't, of course he didn't graduate from there. His parents, who were judges during that time period, sent him off to Chattanooga. And he went to a private school there because people weren't going to I'm not gonna let my child be integrated. That sort of thing. Of course, we're gonna see that this even carries over into other decades when we look at integration of schools with busing. The idea that they're moving minorities to majority schools or majorities to minorities, and that's also a big issue. Because most people really do want a neighborhood school. Let's see.
I don't understand racism. It's hard to believe that it happened so soon ago, that this was a major problem.
Like the police just speak blind. It's just the colors.
That's why actually Springdale is an amazing school to be at, because you're the school that's integrated. I mean, you're the school that
Very.
you see every culture here, and we all seem to get along for the most part. Sure, people a lot of times, will associate with one another because of language. Usually, language is a key thing. You want to speak the language of most people.
And maybe they'll at least, about course that you can speak Spanish naturally. Take it first language.
Yes, sir. Okay. What's the next topic?
Ed Sullivan,
Hmm?
Ed Sullivan show.
Oh, I need to talk about, keep going back.
Central High Cross.
Joseph McCarthy. I want to talk about Joseph McCarthy real quick. We talked about East-West conflict and that sort of stuff. Now, Dr. Henderson is going to teach you a little bit more about Joseph McCarthy tomorrow. I just want to get you the basics. He was a guy who was a senator. He was a senator from Wisconsin, and he is a Republican. Okay, not to say that anything's bad about the Republicans, but there was a Republican president. Okay, typically, you don't see an individual who is going to protest against the government and against politicians if their party's in power. Just usually doesn't happen. Okay? He ended up going out against the U.S. government and the military at first by saying that there are people who are in our military, people who are in strategic positions, people in the church, the Protestant church, people in, like actors, movie directors, things like that. He goes after people and he says that they're communist and they're going to try to overthrow our government, and that he could prove all these people who were communists.
Is this where the whole Illuminati thing started?
No, but I could understand where you would ask that. All these conspiracies. And then pointing things out and, like pointing at you and making, saying that you're a communist and prove that you're not. Because you know what? You went to a party 2 years ago where she's a communist, and you were there. I think you were working out something and you're trying to overthrow the government. And he was just one of those kind of, he was always after somebody. And he got on the news. And then finally, the news broadcasters, finally other politicians, finally even the president really didn't say much against him, even though he didn't agree, because he didn't want to do it publicly. Because it was the same party.
I actually remember, this is just something interesting I wanted to note, if I can. The cartoon penguins of Madagascar, there was an episode with a guest character whose name was McCarthy and who blamed all of the other characters for working for a villain named the Red Squirrel, who turned out to not exist.
Yes. That's a play off of that.
That's a play off of this.
That's a play off of it.
Awesome.
But Joseph McCarthy, he's going to say, even things against, like J. Edgar Hoover. Okay, you don't want to say anything against him, head of the FBI, that sort of thing. But I don't know, nut job. He was one of our politicians who was a nut job, and eventually he's going to be censured, to where that's where Congress is basically telling you that what all you said was wrong because you couldn't prove it. You've done more harm than good. The result is he starts drinking an awful lot, and he ends up dying of hepatitis. Okay? So real shortly, like in 1957. So anyway.
Yeah, he was like senator for 10 years.
Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is, those guys that came back from fighting in World War II?
Oh, yep.
Okay? Those guys that came back from fighting in World War II. First of all, think about it the time before. During World War II. Didn't have lots of children. Reason why you didn't have lots of children during that time period is people who were childbearing, you know, the years typically associated, you know, like the 20s and the 30s. A lot of times, you know, the men were fighting in a war. So you're going to see a dip in population. You're going to see a dip in births. You're not going to see as many. First of all, the woman, you know, she's Rosie the Riveter. She's fighting in the war. Now, Rosie the Riveter is getting unemployed because she can go back home and be the homemaker, which, to add another thing in there, a lot of them stayed in the workplace. Okay? But, you know, the men come back that survived, so they get married and boom, lots of babies. Okay? So there's a time period that we know as the baby boom. Now, the baby boom impacts lots of things. It impacts, you know, housing, because people want houses. It's going to impact, I don't know, say if you were opening a business and it was during the baby boom, I might think of maybe opening something, you know, selling cribs. Or I might open a business of daycare, something. Okay? And then you'll also see these baby boom eras play again. Because when you have the baby boom and you have all these babies that are being born, and then when they get old enough to have children, you're going to see a surge, a baby boom surge, and then again when they get old enough. So you're going to keep seeing this again and again and again. Okay, so one of those things you might have thought about was like, all right, I know when this baby boom is and all these children coming up, I'm going to maybe go into education because they all have to have an education. You know, so schools are going to make money. Of course, we're also going to see in the 1950s that education in schools changes. You know, they shoot up a spy satellite, or a satellite in general, Sputnik, and oh my goodness, we're all fearful. You know, the Soviets, they set off, you know, an atomic bomb. Now we have competition. So they start focusing on sciences and maths, things like that. Your liberal arts education, you know, your foreign languages, you're studying Latin, geography, that sort of stuff. Don't seem to be doing as much of that anymore. Okay. So you had the baby boom. Now the baby boomers, they got to have a place to live. That started another problem. See, land and property. One of the things that occurred is you ended up having a GI loan. With the GI Bill, they had a GI loan, and the GI loan would give people who served in the military an advantage, if you will, or access to funds to buy a home. So they get home, and then they want to move to where there's a job. Eisenhower's also building freeways, so now you can, because freeways will allow military to get across a country quickly. So you have these freeways that now allow cities to start building its suburbs, its outlying areas. One of the examples that I gave you was a place called Levittown. And Levittown was a place, this very large-scale suburb, where you see all these cookie-cutter homes. Okay? Have you ever been in an older town, an older city typically, and or you know, you watch some television show that's based on, I don't know, the 60s, 70s, something like that, and you'll see these houses, to where the houses all look exactly like, they're built exactly the same, except, you know, this house might have a red brick, this one might be a white brick, this one might be a, you know, a siding of some sort, you know, this one might be whatever. You know, but it's all the same thing, just they change it up a little bit. Okay? Subdivisions today, a lot of subdivisions even mirror this. One of the styles of homes that I do want to mention too, because it's just kind of a fun one, that comes out during this time period is a ranch house. Have you ever heard of those? Okay, typically you see like a carport or a garage, long roof, a porch of some sort, you know, a stoop, you know, a window for the living room, and then you see bedrooms kind of going off down from it. But that's a ranch style home that was new for the 1950s. Doesn't mean they're small, but sometimes they're large. Let me see, is there anything else I need to, the Ed Sullivan Show. During this time period, it was also kind of interesting. You see a lot of notable people. You see like Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe, people like that seem to really come to a forefront, you know, in our minds. But we have a show called the Ed Sullivan Show. And the Ed Sullivan Show was like the David Letterman or the Tonight Show, something like that. You ended up having people that would go to it, and it might be a politician that he gets interviewed, and then there might be a segment that's maybe a comedy, and then there might be a segment to where it's going to, you know, show like Elvis Presley. singing, or the Beatles or something like that when that comes out. Most popular show during that particular time period.
Walter and
All right.
Okay.
They still do. We see those today as, like the Tonight Show and that sort of stuff. But one of the most popular shows of all times. One of the things I do want to point out as far as shows, that you see that's a little bit different. You had shows that would come out like, I don't know, the I Love Lucy show, something like that. And they would come out and they're in their act, they play their parts, and then all of a sudden you'll see something like, and a word from our sponsors. And then the actor or somebody from, the agency, if you will, would come out and they would say, do your biscuits taste wonderful? Try Martha White, or do you have difficulty getting stains out of your clothes? Try Tide, and just that kind of stuff. But not as often. Normally you go to a true commercial, but these were like on the set. See, the movies or the talk show or something like that was on the set of General Electric. General Electric sells the product, so they create the set.
So it was like a sponsored YouTube video.
Yes, it was like a cooking show that you only cook their food. You understand what I'm saying? So, those were always interesting. Lots of things happened in the 1950s. When you think of the 50s, you need to think of like Happy Days. People had the poodle skirts. Boys are wearing leather coats and t-shirts, that sort of stuff, and slicking their hair back, and the girls are
Greasers.
yeah. It is interesting. And you also see this generation gap where people really, there is pretty much a difference between the youth and the adults. We seem to always have a generation gap to some extent, but this one seemed to be a big one. You can go. Thank you. Did I get you to sign a paper?
I signed it.
Did it go past?